So let me be clear, this is probably my retirement from the Boulder World Cups, but not from the Lead World Cups.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Struggle. It's me, Ryan, your host. Happy New Year. Happy freaking New Year. We did it. We've done it. It's 2025 and we're already winning because we've got Adam the GOAT Ondra on the show to kick off this new year here at the Struggle Climbing Show. Adam returns to the show. He agreed to come back. I reached out to him. We hadn't talked in a little while. I knew he was working on something kind of secret. This was before he announced that he was working on DNA, and we start this conversation talking a little bit about that, but I knew he was kind of out doing something a little under the radar, and I hit him with an email. I kind of just cast my fishing line out there, thinking that I probably wouldn't hear back, and I said, hey, you know, it's been a minute. Would you want to connect? And he got right back to me. He said, yeah, let's talk tomorrow. So I caught him at a good time. He was without the family. He was out with Seb and Jakob and a few others in the Verdon. And we talk about that here in just a bit. And anyway, what a class act. Love this guy. He's a great, great climber, the greatest, in fact, of all time. But beyond that, just a really good, humble, stoked person. I'm not sure I've talked to anybody ever on this show that is just so stoked about climbing. It doesn't matter if it's the most beautiful line in the world or just like a choss pile. Adam Ondra just loves to climb. So we dive into all sorts of topics on this one. We didn't follow the typical training, nutrition, tactics, mental game format that I like to do here on The Struggle because we already did that. And if you haven't listened to that first interview with Adam, it was the number one listened to episode of 2024. Scroll back to January of 2024 and you can hear that. But on this one, it's just like more of a catch up. We kind of let the stoke go. We talk about Kneepads. We talk about boulder grades. We talk about king lines. Does he think silence is a king line? The answer is no. Spoiler alert. But it's an interesting conversation around that. Anyway, so much we cover on that. I'm not going to waste your time talking about that because you're about to listen to it. But I will waste your time talking about me for a second. And if you don't want to hear about me, you can just skip forward like a couple minutes and the interview will start. But I will let you know where I'm at with my training and my climbing because I put down my big project at the end of last year and I'm still really psyched about it. I got to say, I really appreciated the support from the crew here, from all of you who are listening. It took me over a year, but I climbed my first 513A, and I'm riding high on that still, but it's January, and I am diving into training with a force and a fury that can only be fueled by somebody who took the last month doing nothing but eating Christmas cookies and drinking eggnog and watching movies. So here I am, ready and excited to get back into shape, and I'm going to put a huge focus on strength for the next 6 weeks. So if you are interested in hearing how I'm training, how I'm trying to build up strength, I'm pretty weak for the grade, relatively speaking. You know, as a 513A climber, I wouldn't consider myself that, but I've climbed one 513. I am like a V5 boulderer. So I'm going to focus on the next 6 weeks on building up my strength and my power. And then I'm going to be kicking off a new Road 2 series where I'll talk more about this. But anyway, if you care and you want to get all the nerdy details about my training, you can join my Patreon. And even as a free member, you will get access to my monthly plogs where I talk all about how I am training to be the best climber that I can be, which I am now. At 45 years old, I am climbing the hardest that I have ever climbed in my life. So anyway, tune into that and I'll keep you posted. And the other thing I'm really excited about, you guys, is that in 2 days, I launch the premiere of my brand new YouTube series called Struggling With, where I spend a day with a former guest of the show. The biggest names in rock climbing have agreed to take me out for a day and struggle with me on something. And in just 2 days over on the Struggle YouTube channel, you will see me and Alex Honnold struggling on some rock climbs, he on a 14A, me on a 12A, and then doing all sorts of stuff. We're slacklining, we're driving around, we're eating donuts, we're hiking. And then we wrap things up in an ice plunge interview, and I think I managed to push Alex out of his comfort zone. It's pretty fun. So anyway, pop over to the Struggle YouTube channel to see that series when it drops. I've got episodes coming out with Tom Randall, Anna Hazelnut, Emil Abrahamson, Alex Megos. Oh my God, there's just so many. There's so many coming this way this year. I'm really, really proud of it and really excited for it. So anyway, that is enough about that. I hope your year is off to an amazing start. I'm so excited to be on this rock climbing journey with you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting me in the show. And now let's get into it with the absolute greatest of all time, Adam Adam Ondra.
It's
good to see you. How you been?
Yeah, not bad. Currently in France.
Oh, you're in France. Are you with the family or are you out on a solo trip here?
On a solo trip with Jakob and Giovanni Placci and Stefan Scherz. We are in Gorge du Verdon.
Oh, beautiful country. What's going on over there? Are you able to reveal any details?
Yeah, we are climbing some rock. The temple too.
Good.
Well,
Now everything's clear now. You're climbing some rock.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of hard routes in this gorge.
Oh man.
We are attempting the one which is probably thought to be the hardest one out there. So
Is Seb in the area?
he might come down for the weekend.
This is exciting. How's it feeling out there? How are the temperatures?
Temperatures are enjoyable in terms of like hanging around at the crack. Could be colder for hard climbing.
Yeah.
I think this autumn we've experienced quite a bit of rain in Europe. So far, this is kind of the only route that kind of stays dry. So far so good, but hopefully it stays dry even later in the autumn. Because I think once this route gets wet, I don't think it really dries up earlier than in spring. So let's see. Hopefully
Cool.
rain. Yeah, it gets so steep, so you can climb in a really heavy rain and you don't really even notice it, but you definitely notice the humidity,
Right.
20 meters of like really steep rocks. So there are even some multi-pitch routes that go all the way to the top, which is like 5-6 pitches. And this route is only like 50 meters. So it's definitely very well covered from the rain, but it's kind of strange because it really takes a lot of time to for the water to seep through. So every day you show up and there's some sections of the rock, some of them are like drier than previous day and some of them are like way more wet. So it's kind of difficult to expect.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I recall videos of Seb on the route, like with icicles forming and he's like chipping ice off of it. And I mean, it just looked so cold and wet, but obviously I guess you get to a point where if it's so cold, then it's dry again. So maybe you just need it to get much colder.
I don't know, but for sure, because I think that's the nature of this like gray, pinchy limestone and tufas. It's like, as long as it's good holds, you can climb in summer, but as soon as it gets really hard and on the limit, you just want it cold. Because then you kind of feel like the pinches just bite into your hands and you just kind of don't have to hold anymore. You don't have to like pinch it, pinch turns into a jug all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. It's so cold that your skin just sticks to it. But then what about numbing out? I mean, do you end up numbing out on the route?
We haven't really tried it yet with like temperature lower than 12 degrees Celsius. But I think in general, routes with a lot of knee bars are the routes where it's kind of almost impossible to get numb. Because as long as there is always a knee bar where you can go upside down and release your hands, you always kind of have a time to warm up your fingers. I think maybe some of the worst routes in kind of numbing out are the ones which are like power endurance on like very crimpy holds. So I don't know, like I can think of like one route back in my home crack, which is a 9A, and it's like 30 moves non-stop on a very small holds, and you feel like you go numb even when it's like 20 degrees Celsius. But I think on knee bar routes, it should be fine. It's just difficult to do more than one try a day, I think, when it's really cold. Because then you really want to rest for a really long time and it just burned too much energy to stay at the crack and rest for like 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah, I'm curious how it goes out there. Like, you mentioned those names of the guys that you're out projecting with, and you spent quite a bit of time with Jakob, of course, up in Flatanger as well, projecting B.I.G, and there was a good crew up in Flatanger just recently. Seb was among them. And do you How do you coordinate the projects that you're working on with each other? Does somebody get to vote and say, oh, I want to check out this line, who's coming with me? Like, how do you decide on these things?
I think with Jakob, it was just obvious that we both really wanted to try this project or this route. It's not a project anymore. And Jakob actually already tried it two years ago. So we just coordinated to go during the same time. And I think it was easy. Yes. We both had some obligations earlier this autumn, so it was the first free 2 weeks that were available. And I mean, especially with this route, it just really helps so much. It's very beta dependent, and even though we are basically just copying, the beta of SEP, it just really takes incredible amount of time to like get everything down, because it's like not even the cruxes are very beta and precision dependent, but even like the easier sections just takes really long time to get dialed. It's like you have a certain beta and you think like it's all right, but you just really want to fine tune your methods into like the best possible beta that there is, and that takes a lot of time because there are just so many holds and so many footholds and so many technical knee bars that first, like you try it 5 times and you think like, this is impossible. Like, why is Seb using it? But then you just, change the body position a little bit and all of a sudden it works.
I'm curious how you project a climb that's beta intensive, but also it's long and you're trying to find the most efficiency in every section. Do you work it in sections?
Yeah, we definitely have some fixed ropes. So for example, like the first 12 meters are very skin intense. So we usually skip that and just jog up and mostly work on the 2 cruxes, which are just below the half of the route, and sometimes working on the upper part, which is kind of the section which in theory you shouldn't fall once you are past the second crux, but it's definitely wise to have it dialed 100%. And sometimes, all the session we are just working on the crux, free moves, and just trying it out all over again to kind of feel like if we can, I don't know, find a different body position and just try to really tune it in.
Dude, so mega. Well, I'm really excited to hear more about how that process goes. It's interesting when I put out the word that we were connecting and I got like a million questions from listeners like immediately. And one of them that came in, it kind of pertains to this. So let me just find it real quick. Paul asks about competitiveness. He says, I wonder how elite athletes feel about competitiveness. They always seem so collaborative and nice and sharing beta. But how does it feel when somebody sends their project before them? How do you balance being ambitious without going to a darker place? So you're kind of in that world right now. What's it like? Because I'm sure, you and Jakob and the others there, you all want to send it really bad. So how do you deal with that competitiveness and use it for good and not get too swept up in it?
I don't know. I don't think it's that difficult because I think we both see with Jakob that working on this route together has so many benefits. And I think in my case, for example, in the main crux, like on the first day, I was kind of like, this is strange. Like, it just doesn't work. And, there were just, of course, I knew which handholds I should hold and which foot where I should put my feet. But then there are like subtleties in like the movement, and like watching Jakob actually doing the move made me realize, okay, maybe I just have to turn my body a little bit different, and all of a sudden, okay, it works. So I think it's just rational to be kind of collaborative. And I think the fact that the route already has the first ascent maybe takes a little bit of competitiveness. But I think it helps because me and Jakob and most of the other guys are competitors as well. And I think if you are a competitor and you take the competitions in the right way, you know that their friends are rivals, but they are also friends. And, it's when somebody beats you, it doesn't mean like you hate him, You
right.
Just have to accept that, sometimes somebody else is better and sometimes it's you who is better. But I think having the competition base helps a lot, even when you project something together on the rock as well, even if you go for the first ascent.
Well, there was a lot of that, it sounded like, going on out in Flatinger not too long ago. There's a strong crew out there. You weren't out there, but we had Jorge out there. We had Alex Megos was out there. Seb was out there. There was, I think Stefano was out there for a stretch as well. Great crew out there. And a couple repeats of two of your hardest routes in the world there with Change and Move. Were you paying attention to what was going on?
Of course. It's quite interesting, I think the thing that shocks me the most that like completely new beta was found on Move, which is very strange because you basically think is like there is just in the crux there are just 4 handholds on the top of each other and like there is no way you can do something else. Paradoxically, shorter climbers actually found out that you can skip one of the holds and it's probably better.
Well, it's really interesting on Move because I think both Jorge and Alex used Kneepads on that one, which you didn't, and then also found, some slightly different beta. But then, Alex put a post out saying, hey, even with the Kneepads, this thing felt hard, maybe even harder than what Adam initially graded it. So yeah, I'm curious, like because this was quite some time ago, was this like 10, 12 years ago that you did this? When you were looking at the new beta, the new tactics, and also the new equipment, like the gear, like using a Kneepad, what's your thought there?
It's complicated. So long story short, when we are talking about a change, I think that has changed a lot because of the new Kneepads. Especially, I think if you are tall, you can use this beta of Sebois that you pretty much like skip some of the hardest routes. If you are shorter, like Alex or Jorge, you still get a help of the Kneepad, but in the end, maybe the crux move is relatively the same. It's just like the intro is a bit less physical. The topic and that particular knee bar down low in change is basically like you really need the rubber on your thigh. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. The thing with Move is interesting because I think I could send Move only under these very special circumstances after having spent 1 month in Flatanger, always climbing with no knee pads because back then I didn't own any knee pad. And the one I owned, I just didn't really like it. I didn't think like it helped. It was way before like the Send knee pad era. So maybe back in US, you were way ahead and you had some really good homemade knee pads. But yeah, in Europe, they were non-existent. So I was very tactical about using all the knee bars in Move without knee pads. And over the time, if you don't really bruise your thighs too much, you really grow a good callus on your thighs. So there is very crucial, pretty good knee bar, like just before the crux of the move. And it's an undercling that resembles like a plate. So it's pretty good, but this edge of the plate is really biting hard into your thigh, even through a knee pad. So if you don't really have the knee bar, it hurts. And if you really go, a muerte and just release your hands and try to stay as long as possible, it hurts. And it's also very dangerous that maybe you bruise your knees so much that it doesn't heal for another week. So basically I did it in the last day of the trip, when I built a really solid callus on my thighs. And I really went a muerte in terms of like just bruising my knees as much as possible. So I could get a decent rest and in the end sending up the route. Which, brings me to the question that, the great no knee pad or knee pad is not that simple. It's the same if you climb cracks without gloves or with gloves. It's like if you climb cracks without gloves all the time, you just, you build the callus and it actually works. But then there are many knee pads right now. Like there are so many knee bars in here in Verdun that without knee bar, you would just never really use. And yeah, coming back to the no knee pad era would be just horrible. It will be just so much question of pain and so much question of like building and growing the skin on my knees and thighs.
This episode's brought to you by Rungni. Y'all know Rungni. It's Magnus Mitbo's company. I love every single thing they make. Let me highlight a few of my favorite products right now. First of all, the harness pants. Oh my gosh, you probably heard me talk about these pants like for the past year. They are durable, they are stretchy, they are feather light, and they look fantastic. And now, oh man, I'm really psyched. They just launched a new version of the harness pants. It's like an offshoot. It's the harness utility pants. More pockets, elastic waistband for the perfect fit, and also improved sizing, so whether you're rubbing up against rock or trekking through the forest, these pants are tough, they're durable, and they are built to withstand whatever you throw at them. And I also want to highlight Magdust Super Dry. This is a new chalk that they just came out with. Super dry formula. If you've got sweaty hands, or if you're like me, you're spending a lot of time in the gym right now, this stuff will keep your hands sticky on rock or plastic. I love all of it. And if you use code STRUGGLE or that link in your show notes right there, you can get 15% off store-wide. Let's go. I just want to take a quick second here to talk about how I'm keeping track of all my training and climbing over the course of days, weeks, months, and years. And I'm using an actual physical analog journal, a paper journal that I'm holding in my hands right now called the 5-Year Training and Performance Journal. I created this. I've been using something like this for the last 9 years, and it's a reflective journal, meaning I put something in for every single day. And at the end of the year, the next year starts back underneath that first one, so that as you go, you are able to see where you were at 1 year prior, 2 years prior, 3 years prior. You can log your goals at the beginning of every month and see what you checked off. And then the big breakthrough for me is that I'm able to reflect back and see what training interventions are actually working, what are worthwhile, and maybe which ones aren't. And I'm also able to see with a ton of gratitude and joy how much progress I've made. And I've never been able to get that from training apps. I like training apps. They help me to do my training, but this reflective journal has totally changed how I'm able to understand my personal training, my performance, and then everything that I do as a climber, like all my notable routes that I've sent, all my thoughts and dreams, they're all in here. And I get to look back and enjoy that day after day and year after year. And now you can too, because I made it and I'm selling it. And for $40, I think that's probably the cheapest thing you could buy that will last you 5 years as a climber. You can learn more over at thestruggleclimbingshow.com/journal. Yeah, Kneepads and the skill that you helped to pioneer, were like really technical knee barring with Kneepads, has become like an extra element of climbing, and it's opened up new routes. But then when you look back at some of these routes, like change and move that you were able to do without taking advantage of that, it's interesting to see somebody like Alex, who's obviously a very strong climber, and he also admits that he's not a very good knee bar. Like, I don't think he doesn't, knee bar or wear knee pads all that much. And he was kind of making jokes about how bad he was at it. But then he also said, hey, I think Adam could have taken 9B plus on move without a knee pad. That thing is hard. He gave it a 9B plus, or kind of 9B/plus grade, even with the knee pad. So it sounds like that route, is nails hard. I mean, it's nails hard, relatively speaking, against everything. But even with the knee pad,
the way I did it without knee pads was maybe not that far away with knee pads nowadays. But it was just very specific circumstance that I really had those calluses on my thighs.
Right.
But without those calluses, it's just, I agree. It could be 9B plus.
It's so crazy, dude. It's so crazy.
Like somewhere in between,
It's so crazy. Like the commitment you have, like, to developing these calluses and all. I mean, it's just like, it's so wild, and it was so ahead of its time. And now we can put a piece of rubber on our thighs and really push into these things, not to take away anything from Seb or Jorge or Alex or Stefano or, anybody else who's put in time and sent some of those projects. But it's an extra level of commitment when you're trying to build a callus, on your thigh and know that you might only have one go.
Yeah, I must admit it wasn't fun back in those days. I would spend like weeks sandpapering my thighs before a trip, and then like every try considering, should I stay longer in the knee bar or rather just go, because I would like to send my skin on the thighs for another go or for another route,
Wild, dude. So when you do see people go in there and repeat, and in the case of just this past season here, some kind of quick like sends of those, or relatively speaking, what's the feel like? Is it mixed feelings about using new techniques and new gear, or is that just the way things go?
That's the way the things go. And if I were them, I would use the same equipment. And as you know, I'm using the same equipment and just taking all the advantage of the knee bars that I can possibly use. So yeah, for sure. Let me think of change that I really like the lower crux. I think it's really unique. Unfortunately, with the knee bar, it's not really the same, but that's the way it goes. But I don't even want that somebody tries without knee bars anymore. For me, it just doesn't make sense. That's the route has changed a little bit. Maybe the grade should be kind of adjusted to the new gear, and that's it.
I mean, that evokes Hubble in a sense, where there wasn't a knee bar and now there kind of is a knee bar, and likely it makes it quite a bit easier. But is it silly to think that people will only repeat climbs in the manner that the first ascensionist did them?
It depends, in case of Hubble, it's a bit different because I think that particular knee bar without Kneepad just doesn't really work. So in that case, it makes sense to do it without Kneepad. But I think in case of Move, it just doesn't make sense because even without Kneepad, you will just knee bar a lot. It will be just question of suffering so much pain.
Right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, that's great. Well, you saved your friends a little bit of skin by condoning the use of Kneepads. Do you feel like when people spend a lot of time in flatting and they put down those incredibly hard routes, but yet Silence has not seen a repeat, what are your thoughts along when you see people trying on Silence but not seeing the progress or the accomplishment like they have on Change and Move?
No, I think Stefano has quite a lot of progress. Maybe I actually expected him to send it this season. Maybe
really?
It was he didn't really have enough time, and maybe he just spent a lot of time like specializing more into competition climbing. But in autumn 2023, he actually had some pretty good tries. So I think he will try really hard, and he will do it next year. But I'm actually very happy that there are guys actually even trying Silence, considering like how strange and specific it is. Because yeah, for sure, like I think Move is one of the best routes I've ever bolted, and it makes me really happy that I see so much attention, like people appreciating my work, and so I'm not just a climber but also developer. I mean, I haven't bolted that many routes, but if there are some routes that really stick out, then it's Move. Whereas like I don't think Silence is a king line, let's admit it. But I found a project which in a way was very inspiring to me, very unique, and very motivating for me to put into all the effort. But yeah, I don't think it's a king line.
That surprises me because it's so incredibly unique, and for me at least, and probably an entire generation of climbers, it is the epitome of the hardest rock climb in the world. And there are others out there proposed of the same grade, but Silence kind of stands on its own. And why does it not feel like a king line in that cave?
Yeah, maybe it's probably not the first line. When you enter the cave, maybe you would be surprised that the crux itself is hidden in the sea of the rock somewhere, kind of like inside of the cave. And maybe the anchor is not seemingly the most logical place, but I couldn't really think of any more logical place. Would be nice to kind of even top out the cave, but you would have to climb with more ropes, or you have to change the rope or carry a second rope. But for me, climbing Silence was all about like climbing that crack sequence. And yes, in a way, it's very unique. But I think when I think of king line, I also think of like a big line, maybe not only obscure, bizarre moves, but also cool moves. So I don't know. In a way, maybe, yes, it's difficult to argue whether the moves in Silence are cool or just bizarre. And I personally like bizarre moves. I think B.I.G is definitely more of a king line, or DNA as well. In a way, though, king line doesn't mean it's always super fun to try. So in a way, for me, Silence was more fun to try than B.I.G, Even though I think B.I.G is a king line. Just because I just fallen so many times on this one crux move that I got to a certain point that it's just, yeah, I kind of hate the route. And I wish I was like done with it,
Yeah.
Whereas with Silence, I never really got into that place. It's also like coincidence while you're working on it, you know. There are some routes that might be like super uninspiring, but you know, maybe the whole process of working on the route is just so enjoyable and fun and in a way easy, even though you might spend like 30 days on the route. It just really depends. We had quite a long debate about like, because I think Jakob asked me, well, like, what do you think is the best 9B I've ever climbed? And I said Planta de Shiva, and he was so surprised, thinking like, oh, he was actually thinking it was like one of the worst 9Bs he's ever done.
Really?
So for sure, Planta de Shiva doesn't have like the best rock. But for me, movement-wise and like in terms of like how fun it is to try, in like every single try, you might like get a high point and you just keep trying more and like you just keep getting the high point higher and higher and eventually you send it. And like most likely the extent will actually be like a super huge fight because it's a kind of a route which really allows you to fight, you know? Whereas some of the other maybe king lines which are on the bulletproof rock is maybe I don't really get the same experience because you just keep falling repeatedly on one single move. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's relatable to me that I don't climb anywhere near, obviously, where you climb, but there are certain climbs that the entire process can be enjoyable and some where I just kind of want it. I get to a point where I really just want it to be done. And then I have to decide, well, should I keep going through this process of discomfort and is it going to be good for me at the end? Or should I cut my losses and just move on to something else? And do you have that conversation with yourself about B.I.G, for example?
I mean, for me, in my mind, I'm in the situation that I just can't give up. You know, I have to get it done. But in a way, yeah. I'm also in a situation that, yes, I know I have to get it done, but I also want to kind of make the process enjoyable. So maybe in that perspective, it's just better to wait half a year and, you know, come back with a fresh motivation and kind of be excited. Okay, let's make another trip. And because Flatanger is like my favorite place, but making another trip for yet another session of multiple tries, always falling from the same move is, I don't know. And then the bad thing about Flatanger is that there is absolutely nothing else for me to climb.
Right.
And it's not allowed to bolt more. So it's really frustrating. So I don't really have any side project there. So having like a side project in Flatanger in the cave itself would like help so much to make another trip with a full motivation back to Flatanger.
For sure. Did you say there's no more development being allowed out in the cave, or it's just already been developed?
No, there are some disputes because the cave has 3 owners. For me, it's kind of bizarre that you can actually own a cave, maybe at least from the European perspective, maybe
Trolls.
not so much from the American perspective. But yes, the cave is private property, and there are some disputes between the 2 owners. And basically, because of these disputes, one of the owners said no more bolting to, regulate the process. In a way, I think it's positive because that's kind of saving the cave from way too many link-ups, which would sure happen. So, because the cave by its nature is kind of so easy to make so many link-ups. So, anyway, in a way, because I feel as one of the godfathers of the cave, I see of it as a good thing. On the other way, you know, maybe back at my home crag, I was responsible for making way too many link-ups. So it's kind of maybe hypocritical, no? Saying like, oh, I'm happy that Flatanger is kind of, you know, has remained as only doing the pure lines. Whereas in other crags, I think make as many link-ups as possible.
Right. Well, I think that perspective only comes with time. Like wisdom comes with time. Sometimes you have to, you know, bolt the heck out of put a grid in a cave and have, you know, 100 link-ups and then maybe decide, yeah, that's maybe not the best way to do it. It's fascinating about Flatanger.
Flatanger Cave is something so unique out there in the world that it's maybe worth it, you know, to only stick to the pure lines. Whereas maybe the cave, which doesn't really have the same rock quality, is maybe all right to, you know, spoil with more bolts for all the possible link-ups.
This episode is supported by PhysiVantage Nutrition, and I've been using PhysiVantage since long before there was ever even a podcast. I've been a paying customer for many years now. It tastes the best, and it does the best for me and supporting my goals in my training, my recovery, and my performance as a rock climber. I'm sure you all are familiar with their products. Their athlete team is crazy, from Alex Megos to Jonathan Segrist, Amity Worm to Daniel Woods, and so many other crushers out there are using PhysiVantage regularly. And that's because it works. I use their supercharged collagen every day before I train my fingers or I go climbing. I use their vegan PowerPlex protein, which tastes incredible. The chocolate flavored protein that PhysiVantage makes is just crazy. That's like my sweet treat that I have at the end of every day. I'll either mix it up with some water or milk, or I'll mix a scoop in with my plain Greek yogurt, and it tastes like chocolate pudding. It is so good. And then recently, because I've been trying to build up that endurance for my long, pumpy climbs out here at the Red, I've been using a lot of their Sendurex, which is like a beetroot extract. It's highly concentrated. It is science-backed to help support the endurance system, and I'm feeling like I'm climbing longer and harder and also recovering faster when I'm using PhysiVantage products. So I think you're going to love it too. If you haven't tried it, you can get 15% off your order over at PhysiVantage.com using code STRUGGLE15. If you're looking to level up your training, your recovery, and your performance, I have really felt the difference using this stuff for the past few years, and I think you will too. Check it all out at PhysiVantage.com and use code STRUGGLE15 to get that discount. This episode is supported by patrons of the show. If you're a Patreon member, you're not hearing this because you get ad-free episodes. But if you are hearing this, I would love for you to consider becoming a Patreon member. I've got over 100 hours of bonus content over on Patreon that includes extended interviews, bonus episodes, as well as pro clinics with the absolute biggest names in the sport. I'm hustling really hard over here in the podcast/utility closet, and I'm really proud of how big this struggle community has grown. Whatever your budget is, and even if you can only pop in for a few months, you could come check it out, and for a few bucks, get yourself access to all of that amazing content. So if you're serious about training and climbing, if you're serious about these athletes, I think you are because you're listening to this right now, I'd love to invite you over to Patreon to check it out. There's that link right there down in your show notes, or you can learn more over at patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show. Thank you so much for your support. I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up. Let me know how I can continue to deliver great stuff for you. And now let's get back to this fantastic conversation. I want to shift. I want to talk about competitive climbing for a second here, because since we last talked, I mean, it's been a hell of a year. You've had World Cups, you've gone to the Olympics, you've developed this new shoe that I want to explore. A lot has happened and a lot has developed in the world of competitive climbing. And not too long ago, you had this World Cup in Prague. Great event, huge event in front of the home crowd. I mean, the energy looked electric. You had incredible, qualifying and semi-rounds. And then the finals seemed like there was some challenging stuff in there. And it didn't end with a podium for you, but you also then opined as a part of this great video that you put together that maybe it would be your last World Cup. And so I'm curious if that's a real thing. Are you considering a retirement from competitive climbing?
No. So let me be clear. This is probably my retirement from the Boulder World Cups, but not from the Lead World Cups. Also, after slight disappointment after the Olympics, where I think I really showed my best in lead, but the boulder round was very disappointing. I don't think that there is so much future for me in terms of bouldering World Cups. Also, I think because, the young generation is just getting so much more better. And I think with me aging, I don't think my powerful and explosive power will get any better. I will only get a bit worse. And on the top of that, as some of the moves gets really intense for my shoulders, and probably shoulders are, let's say, my Achilles heel, it just makes sense that I don't do the bouldering comps anymore. But that doesn't mean that I lost my motivation for the Lead World Cups or potentially Olympics in Los Angeles in 4 years. That is really hard to tell because it's not really entirely sure whether in Los Angeles there will be a lead as a single discipline. If there is, then most likely I have a motivation to maybe try again. But if, let's say, Los Angeles will be two disciplines combined like in Paris, that I don't think I will try. Most likely because, yes, I really think that whenever I go for a bouldering competition, I'm on the fringe of getting injured. So it was cool in Prague, as I could feel like, yes, I can actually still be competitive with the youngsters, even on the new modern school kind of boulder problems. But facing the first boulder problem in the finals, knowing I should easily climb that boulder problem, just knowing that there is this one shouldery move where I can easily injure myself, and like giving 4 tries every time, like trying a bit harder, feeling like how it's going to feel. And then the last try, okay, trying to give it almost my everything, and then feeling a bit of pain. I was like, okay, it was kind of nice to feel like I'm still competitive, but in the end, very clear sign that, okay, this is not for me. I should quit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm glad you made that distinction between lead and boulder, because you're incredibly strong on lead. And we'd love to see you, continue in lead competitions, as we just saw Chris Sharma kind of come back from retirement and perform well, in fact, on lead at 42, 43 years old. So, plenty of opportunity there, and that'll be really exciting to follow. But I'm curious, on the bouldering side, you mentioned kind of this younger generation coming up. And I had a conversation with Tom Randall not long ago about the Olympics and what we're seeing as this evolution in competitive climbing. And he felt that this Olympics, this past one in Paris, might be the last where we see highly achieving rock climbers in the field. Like, so those who predominantly or significantly focus a lot of their time projecting out on rock, whether it's boulders or sport climbs, compared to those who predominantly or almost entirely focus just on indoor competitive plastic climbs. And he feels that now going forward, we're going to see a widening of that gap, where it's not likely that rock climbers will be podiuming. And I'm not sure if he was speaking specifically to boulder or lead or combined, but I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, I think especially in boulder, we will see more of it. As, yes, bouldering is getting much more specific. In a way, it's getting even more complex. I think the complexity that you have to show as a World Cup boulder is getting really insane. It's not that, you're just a monkey that knows how to jump. It may have been like that maybe 6-7 years ago, when like this really dynamic style kind of started. But in a way, I really like it, because it's not really possible that if you know how to jump, you can win a World Cup. But you really have to be good in slabs. You really have to be strong as well. It's not like you make triple paddles on jugs. Now you make triple paddles on like very bad slopers and crimpers. So you kind of combine the traditional power and the modern dynamism in like one move. And It's really cool. But I think in order to like train for all these different skills, it's just the most efficient to spend most of the time actually in the gym. Nowadays, climbing on the rock can be helpful, maybe more in the mental side of it. Because I think when you're training, maybe you don't really give your 100% into like each try. And when you're projecting outdoors, maybe it's really, you're under pressure. It's the last day of the trip. You really want to send. So I think it could be helpful in that perspective. Lead World Cups, I think, will never really be that far away from the actual rock climbing. And there I believe that we will see more people combining rock and competitions at the same time. As I think even for me, for myself, let's say the more kind of modern style of the lead World Cups are maybe actually good for me. Using more volumes means like you can actually use your feet more and maybe cheat more and maybe find some knee bars and shit like that. So that's good. And I think like also training for the competitions is helping me to actually be stronger on the rock as well. And for me, like in terms of technique, I feel like, I can transfer a good indoor shape onto the rock really quickly, and vice versa. So I think that is quite good. But I don't really think like it's too bad for our sport. Unfortunately, it sometimes as a climber, I think it would be cool to see a competition in bouldering, in a more old school style. But in a way, probably, the most interesting style to watch is the way that is right now, this incredibly complex mixture of different style.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly fun to watch, no doubt. And it is interesting to see boulder type movement and sets move on to the lead wall. And now there's paddle dynos on the lead wall. There was some of that in the Olympics, some like really hard sections down low that kicked strong climbers off. And so even if you aren't competing in boulder, you're gonna run into some of that movement, at least on the lead wall. And as those volumes, those holds, and the styles of that setting evolves, our equipment's trying to evolve as fast with it. And you just recently came out with a new shoe that you designed with Sportiva. And this term smedging keeps coming around, as I see on like an Instagram, which is a word that I never knew existed. I don't know if it's a new word or if it's something that's been used in the past, but
I think I invented it.
Did you? Okay.
I invented it while I was explaining, the La Sportiva designers to explain what kind of shoe I need for the boulder competitions. So there were two things that I found crucial, and one is smearing, and the other one is small but slopey footholds, which is very different to small but in-cut footholds.
Right.
Because in a way, slopey foothold is a little similar to smearing on a bigger volume. So instead of like trying to always think like slopey footholds or something like that, we just invented, so we stuck to the three terms: edging, smedging, and smearing. So the priority was to develop a shoe which would be excellent for smearing and smedging at the same time. It's easy to make a super nice shoe for smearing, but which is really bad for everything else. And the current trend in bouldering comps, and I think not only in bouldering comps, but actually in commercial setting worldwide, is that you're combining volumes with actually pretty poor and slopey footholds. So I think this is the best result that we could get from working for almost 2 years with the two La Sportiva designers. And yeah, I'm pretty happy.
In addition, you're going to need it to be able to be an all-arounder in terms of heel hooking and toe hooking. I mean, it's got to perform as a shoe. You can't change your shoes in the middle of a comp, can you? Or can you?
It would be so good. And for some of the climbs, I was thinking about it, but like unless there is a ledge or like, kind of a couch-like knee bar, it would not really be possible.
Right. That'd be so rad to see, though. It's like Tom Randall taking his shoe off in the middle of his route. Shoe game is incredibly important. All of us like to obsess about our shoes. So for the new Ondra Comp, is that something that you would also wear on a lead comp route, do you think? Or is it very specific to the bouldering round of comp climbing?
So I think the shoes are always connected also to your weight. So I think if you're a really lightweight climber, it could be very all-round shoe, which could be good for lead climbing, even for outdoor climbing. I think for me, for my weight, it's more specific to, let's say, indoor modern bouldering. But for me, it's definitely the best shoe for toe hooking I've ever had. So I would even, have it in my backpack for some of my bouldering outdoor projects with hard toe hook.
Well, this is great because I want to talk about some hard bouldering outdoor projects for a second, Adam. Will Bosi just sent or repeated his fourth V17 with Spots of Time, the Aidan Roberts route that he put up in the Lake District there. And prior to that, Return of the Sleepwalker, Burden of Dreams, and Alphane. And so he is unquestionably the hardest climbing boulderer in the world right now. And one route that he hasn't managed to repeat, Adam, is a little line called Terranova. And I'm curious if you think that you might have perhaps put up the first V17 in the world and not known it.
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so. I'm expecting that Will will come back soon and he will climb it and he will confirm my suggestion that it's 8C plus. But we'll see.
But he's put some sessions on it, or like he's put a couple of trips on it.
Never really in the best possible conditions. And I think what is quite unique to Terranova is that it's very specific style, which is like very specific style to our home crag. And our home crag called Moravský Kras, or like there are more crags like Holstein and Slope. So Terranova is located in Holstein, but there are some other hard boulders also in neighboring crag called Slope. Most of the other hard boulders in this crag are maybe not necessarily so specific because they are steeper and they're very like finger oriented. There might be some hard body positions, but I think they mostly require a style of climbing that Will is pretty familiar with.
That's his strength.
A lot on like shitty, frictionless limestone climbing crags like Raventor back in UK. Whereas I think Terranova is a little less steep and is really more about like just really pure precision on very weird frictionless limestone. And I think that's really where it really comes down that you really need to take your time and just work a lot on the specific moves that at the beginning just feel really weird. So I think when that happens and he gets it dialed and gets more accustomed to the style, he will say finally that it is an C+. But let's see.
Well, he has, as you noted, he's put some time on it, and although he hasn't sent it yet, I think he will likely get back there and want to put some more time on it. He does have incredibly strong fingers, like bulletproof strong fingers, it seems like, and yet has climbed, the hardest climbs in the world, but not yet this one. And so I'm curious how you feel it breaks down, because it's kind of like a traverse, right? And the last trip he had out there, he did some big links, some like overlapping sections, but it kind of traverses and like ends on a jug, and it's these really terrible holds like you're saying. Again, all of this I think would suggest that Will would be very strong at it, but what do you think it's going to take? Like what was for you, what unlocked Terranova?
So it breaks down in like 9 moves, which by itself I think are like hard 8C, into maybe 5 moves of 8A plus. Which is a section which is more kind of like power endurance, and I think I only dropped it once. On that section, I famously did it with this weird crossover move, but Will had found his own beta, and this Czech girl who is actually very close to sending it, which is really cool, found her own beta for this finish. But I think the main problem is like the first 9 moves, while the first 4 moves are more sort of like just the intro. And then the next 5 moves are the crux, involving like a very sketchy heel hook and very slippery kind of pinch. So I think the problem is like to really get dialed every single move and climb with the flow. Because if you kind of like climb slow and just lose some power and mostly the friction while climbing relatively slow, then you get 5 moves higher and all of a sudden you just don't have the friction and you fall off. It is very small holds for sure, but it's nowhere close to being a board climb, like Burden of Dreams or Sports of Time. Not to say that I think both Burden of Dreams and Sports of Time are incredibly technical, just like in a different way. And it's a technique that Will is incredibly good at. But Terranova requires a different technique, which I think in his career maybe hasn't really trained so much, and he just needs a little more time to get used to it. That's my opinion.
Well, okay, so you're not gonna...
technique that I think spent quite a bit more time in my career just climbing on these weird things like this, because we actually, apart from Terranova, especially in like easier grades, we have quite a lot of weird climbing, both on boulder and both on sport climbs like Terranova.
All right, so you're not going to upgrade your own boulder, but Will might. So we'll see what he says there. All right, that wraps things up with the greatest climber and one of the greatest guests over here on The Struggle of all time, Adam Ondra. But hey, if you want more Adam, and I know you do, I got a bonus episode that just dropped for people who are patrons or Apple subscribers of the show. There's even a free tier or a free trial that you can get if you want to check it out. And in this bonus conversation with Adam, we talk for a while longer about hard bouldering, and Adam actually reveals the V17 that he's got his sights set on for this winter, and also how he's going to be training for that. He talks about the experience of working hard boulders versus the experience of working hard sport routes, and if he had to pick a lane, which lane it would be. We talk about comp climbing a little bit more, and he shares the comp climber that he feels is, quote, out of this world, and who he thinks could be pushing the limits on rock if this guy ever sets his sights that way. We talk about training and the biggest mistakes that he feels most climbers, like regular climbers like me and probably you, make when it comes to our training and our climbing. He's got a hot take on hangboarding, his biggest weakness as a climber, so much more, and including patron questions. If you are a patron of the show, you get to send in questions. You can get instant access to all of that right now at zero cost, actually, with a free trial over at patreon.com/thestruggleclimbing-show, or right there in your Apple Podcast player if you are an iPhone person. And you're also going to get instant access to more than 100 hours of other bonus content featuring the best of the best. I'm talking about Adam Ondra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Alex Honnold, Magnus Mitbo, and so many more athletes and coaches that have been on the show here. Plus, pro clinics on stronger fingers with Dr. Tyler Nelson, advanced bouldering with Allison Vest, moonboard with Ravioli Biceps, performance hacks with Hazel Finley, and so many more. It's all there for just a few bucks a month, or actually zero cost right now with that free trial, so you can try it before you buy it. Although, honestly, your support as patrons and subscribers is really what helps to keep this thing going. So if you got a few bucks, I certainly would appreciate your help as I'm jamming away here in the podcast/utility closet. Thank you. I love you. Big thanks and appreciation to all of our show sponsors who have brought you this episode here at zero cost. Way to go. You can check your show notes for links and special discounts from those guys that are only available to Struggle listeners, and there's some great discounts there, so check them all out. Actually, you can see all of the show's brand sponsors and special deals by popping over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/deals. Hey, did you know that The Struggle is carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? Well, you do now, and it feels pretty good for me to write that check every month. They're doing such amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. Y'all can get inspired and learn more about their amazing work over at honnoldfoundation.org, and toss them some love if you can. They're doing awesome stuff. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. The show is produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by the wonderful Glenn Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the show. If you want to do something that helps me out for zero cost, you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, or just share this with one of your climbing friends or the gym that you climb at. It really helps to get the word out there. I appreciate it. I hope your training and climbing are going great, and if you are struggling like me, well, just remember the struggle makes us stronger.